Okay, how the family got here in Washington. My mother's parents lived in Minnesota and Wisconsin in the around 1900, and my grandfather, her father, had a printing job with a newspaper, and he got a job then in Seattle for the Seattle Times, and that's how her side of the family got into Washington. My father's side came from Nebraska, and I don't know just why they came to the state of Washington, but they did, and they lived in Kitsap County for a good many years. And my mother and father eventually met in school, married, and had 3 children. Jean, my older sister, Bill, my brother, and myself. My parents settled in the Green Lake area of Seattle, and that's where I was born, and my sister and brother. And when I was 5.5 years old, I happened to be asking a bunch of questions about a couple of neighbor boys who were making a car, a wooden car. And I was asking so many questions, and they said to me, "If you don't shut up, we're going to sick that dog on you." And then they pointed about 50 feet away at a dog that was just lying down. Anyway, I said, "He wouldn't hurt me." Well, boy, was I wrong. I went down and I petted him once and then walked back towards the boys, and the dog caught me by the arm and then twirled me around and bit part of my nose off. And that was not so fun. I believe it was a police dog. The dog that bit me saw a dog across the street, a little dog named Rags, and he ran after Rags and ran through the house that Rags was running through, and ultimately Rags got killed by the dog. Later, I understand that some policemen killed the dog that hurt me. But I wound up in the hospital. It was my mother's and father's anniversary. They were out celebrating and came home to find their child in the hospital. My father died when I was 6, and that left my mother as a widow. And she went to the University of Washington to become a school teacher. And when she got her certificate for that, we moved to the little town of Hamilton, which is also in Skagit County, along with Burlington, where I now live. And she worked there for 2 years and then got a job over in Oak Harbor on Whidbey Island. And that's where I graduated from high school, was in Oak Harbor, as well as did Bill. Jean was already graduated, my sister. Okay, when my mother got a job in Oak Harbor in 1942, I was just entering the 8th grade, and I was kind of lonesome. I mean, really kind of lonesome. I didn't have any friends there yet, and my best friend turned out to be my dog Sandy. Every day I would come home from school and I would play with Sandy. I would throw a rock from a pile that was close to the house. He would go chase the rock. Then I would run through the garage, which had an open end on one end and a door on the other. So I would go through the open end and down to the door, and I would open the door and then I would shut it. And Sandy, in the meantime, was running after the rock, and then he went into the garage, and then he'd have to turn around because he couldn't use the door. So in the meantime, after I got out to the door, I ran around to the front of the house and up the stairs and over the railing. All the time, Sandy was chasing me and barking like crazy. He never caught me, but that wasn't part of the game. Then we'd go pick up another rock and do it all over again. One of the best memories that I have of Sandy is the day that he was barking, just one bark on the porch. I happened to be in the kitchen, and I heard him bark, and I opened the door, and there he was sitting. It was as if he had a big smile on his face, for right to his left was a kitten. He had brought me a kitten, and that was the sweetest thing. I always loved that dog, but having him give me that present was so sweet. Such a nice dog. Unfortunately, he got run over a couple of years later, and that ended that. But of all the animals I've had in my life, Sandy is and has been always my favorite. This area in the state of Washington is probably the very best of any state in the whole Union. It's wonderful here. It's nice, cool, not too hot, not too cold. It's been one. I'm so glad that I was able to live here in both in Oak Harbor and now in Burlington.
Up in this area, the Deception Pass Park, there are caves. I used to go hiking to them. This is Washington State's most popular state park. It's right in here, as you can see with all the trees. Okay, you can see the tide moving out. Got a nice view there, the tide.
Bass Lake is part of Deception Pass State Park, and on the lake you can only use fly fishing, and they don't allow any motors on boats. Now, in regards to Fidalgo Island, which has it has a lake called Campbell Lake, and on Campbell Lake is another island. So I have heard that it's the only island on an island in the whole United States. Maybe Alaska is different, but anyway, Fidalgo Island is the name of the first island, and I don't know what the name of that little island is that sits on the lake on Fidalgo Island.
The island. So we're on an island, and there's Lake Campbell, and then you see the island that's in the lake. It's a very rare occurrence. Island, lake, island.
I've been coming to the Arts and Crafts Festival in Anacortes probably for at least a dozen years, if not more. And it seems like every time I find some new thing that I can't live without. It's very fun here. This is the quilt shop in Anacortes, one of my favorite quilt shops over the years, and I have been in here many, many, many times, but my time in quilt shops is lagging because I have a problem with my eyesight, darn it. Anyway, I have made many quilts, and for baby quilts and grown-ups, and I just love this type of thing. I hope maybe I can do some more of it.
Yeah. We're back in.
My husband Rick and I really do like to go to the farmhouse to have dinner quite frequently. It's easy, it's quiet, it's just really, really nice, and the food is wonderful.